You're looking at a photograph from November 1888, taken in the parlor of the Whitmore estate in Blackheath, Kent. The image shows a father and his young son, both dressed in their Sunday finest, standing beside a mahogany writing desk. The father's hand rests protectively on the boy's shoulder as they gaze solemnly into the camera lens. What makes this photograph impossible is that Thomas Whitmore, the father, had been buried in Highgate Cemetery 6 years earlier. The boy, Edmund, was only 2 when his father died of consumption in 1882. Yet here they stand together, captured by the lens of photographer Cornelius Ashford on November 15, 1888. The plate glass shows no signs of manipulation, no double exposure, no chemical interference. 3 separate examinations by photographic experts have confirmed the image's authenticity. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you believe about the nature of death itself. The Metropolitan Police sealed this case file in 1889, marking it resolved by natural causes. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Expert analysis revealed details that should have been impossible to capture on film. The father's reflection appears in the polished surface of the desk, yet no living person stood in that position. Weather records show November 15th was unseasonably cold, with frost covering the Blackheath Commons. Inside the Whitmore parlor, witnesses reported the temperature dropped 20 degrees during the sitting. The boy's breath was visible in the photograph, but his father's was not. Cornelius Ashford's equipment ledger notes an exposure time of 47 seconds. Throughout the entire session, only the child blinked. The father remained perfectly still, staring directly into the camera with eyes that several witnesses described as knowing. After developing the plate that evening, Ashford discovered something that made him abandon photography forever. In the background of the image, barely visible in the shadows, stood the silhouette of a woman. Margaret Whitmore, Thomas's widow, had been in London that day, visiting her sister in Kensington. She had no knowledge of the photograph being taken. Yet there she was, captured in the frame, her face turned away from the camera. When confronted with the image, she claimed no memory of being present. The sitting had been arranged by Edmund himself, who insisted his father had asked him to have their portrait made. The boy was 8 years old. He had been talking to his father regularly since the age of 5. His mother had dismissed these conversations as the innocent fantasies of a grieving child, until she saw the photograph. The image would haunt the Whitmore family for generations, but what happened next would prove this was only the beginning. The dead, Edmund told his mother that night, don't always stay buried. Victorian England in 1888 was a society caught between scientific progress and ancient superstitions. The camera had become a trusted instrument of truth, used in courts of law and medical documentation. Spirit photography was dismissed by serious practitioners as charlatanry and chemical trickery. The Royal Photographic Society had established strict protocols for authenticating legitimate images. Gas lighting illuminated the better neighborhoods, while electric street lamps flickered in the wealthier districts. The Metropolitan Railway connected distant suburbs to the heart of London in under an hour. Yet in the parlors of respectable homes, families still held séances and consulted mediums. The death of Prince Albert in 1861 had made morning photography fashionable among the upper classes. Dr. Septimus Hargrave's medical journal, discovered in the basement of St. Bartholomew's Hospital in 1923, contains detailed observations of the Whitmore case. His notes describe physiological impossibilities that defied conventional medical understanding. The parish register of St. Michael's Church in Blackheath records Thomas Whitmore's burial on March 12, 1882. Father Benedict Morse noted in his personal diary that the funeral was attended by 47 mourners. The grave was sealed with a stone slab weighing nearly 800 pounds. A police memorandum, filed away in Scotland Yard's basement archives, references unexplained circumstances surrounding the Whitmore investigation. Inspector Harold Fitzpatrick's report was marked confidential and removed from public access in 1890. The official explanation cited atmospheric anomalies and emotional disturbance as causes for the perceived irregularities. But those who examined the evidence knew the truth was far more troubling. Medical science could not explain how a decomposed corpse could cast a shadow. Photographic chemistry could not account for the temperature variations recorded during the sitting. The church refused to comment on theological implications of the image. 3 different laboratories analyzed the photographic plate using the most advanced techniques available. Professor Marcus Chenley of the London Institute of Optical Sciences spent 6 weeks studying the image under magnification. His findings, published in a sealed report to the Royal Society, were never made public. Dr. Evelyn Ashcroft, the first woman admitted to the British Medical Association, examined the witnesses for signs of mass hysteria. Her conclusion was that all parties were of sound mind and reliable testimony, yet what they claimed to have witnessed violated the fundamental laws of nature. The evidence suggested that something had reached across the boundary between life and death, something that could manipulate physical matter and leave traces in our world. The implications were so disturbing that official channels chose to bury the investigation entirely. But the photograph remained, and with it, questions that no Victorian mind was prepared to answer. The Whitmore case would become a template for similar incidents across Britain. By 1895, 17 other families had reported identical phenomena. All involved recently deceased fathers appearing in portraits with their children. The pattern, Dr. Hargrave wrote in his final journal entry, suggests we have underestimated the persistence of paternal bonds. The investigation began on November 16, 1888, when Margaret Whitmore brought the photograph to Inspector Fitzpatrick. She arrived at the Blackheath police station at precisely 9:30 in the morning, carrying the image in a leather portfolio. Her hands trembled as she placed the photograph on the inspector's desk. Outside, a steady rain drummed against the station windows, and the gaslight flickered in the damp air. Fitzpatrick's initial reaction was skepticism, suspecting some form of elaborate hoax or double exposure. He summoned Sergeant Mills, who had served as the station's unofficial expert on fraudulent documentation. Mills examined the photograph with a magnifying glass for nearly 20 minutes. His conclusion was immediate and unsettling. The image showed no signs of tampering or manipulation. The photographic plate itself was examined that afternoon by Oliver Pemberton, a chemist from Greenwich. Pemberton's analysis revealed something that defied explanation. The silver halide crystals in the area where Thomas Whitmore appeared showed unusual crystalline formations. These patterns were consistent with extreme cold exposure despite the controlled indoor environment. Margaret Whitmore's testimony, recorded in Fitzpatrick's notebook, provides the first witness account. She described arriving home from London at 7:30 that evening. Edmund met her at the door, excited to show her something special in the parlor. "Papa came back," the boy had told her, "and we had our picture made together." She assumed he was referring to one of his imaginary games. But when she entered the parlor, she found Cornelius Ashford packing his photographic equipment. The photographer's hands were shaking so violently he could barely secure his glass plates. When she asked about the sitting, Ashford could only repeat, "I saw what I saw." The temperature in the room was noticeably colder than the rest of the house. Margaret noticed frost forming on the inside of the windows, despite the coal fire burning in the grate. Edmund sat quietly in his father's favorite chair, apparently unbothered by the cold. When she asked him to describe what had happened, his account was disturbingly detailed. He claimed his father had arrived at 4 o'clock, just as the church bells finished chiming. Thomas had spoken to him about important matters, though Edmund couldn't recall the specific words. The photograph was his father's idea, a way to preserve their reunion. Throughout the sitting, Edmund insisted, his father had held his shoulder firmly. He could feel the weight of his father's hand and the familiar smell of his tobacco. But what disturbed Margaret most was Edmund's casual acceptance of the impossible. The boy showed no surprise, no fear, only the quiet satisfaction of a child whose prayers had been answered. When Ashford developed the plate that night, he discovered the image that would haunt him until his death. The next morning, he refused to deliver the photograph, claiming it was cursed by unholy circumstances. Only after Fitzpatrick's intervention did Ashford reluctantly hand over the image. "What God has joined together," the photographer muttered as he left, "death cannot always put asunder." The medical examination of young Edmund Whitmore took place on November 18, 1888, in Dr. Hargrave's consulting room on Harley Street. Edmund appeared to be in perfect health, showing no signs of nervous exhaustion or psychological disturbance. His pulse was steady at 72 beats per minute, his temperature a normal 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. However, Dr. Hargrave noted several peculiarities that troubled him deeply. The boy's left shoulder, where his father had allegedly placed his hand, showed signs of pressure marking. The skin displayed a faint discoloration consistent with prolonged contact, yet no living person had touched him there. More disturbing was the boy's reaction to certain questions about his father. When asked to describe Thomas Whitmore's appearance, Edmund provided details he could not have known. He mentioned a scar on his father's left wrist from a childhood accident, information never shared with the child. He described his father's voice as deeper than before, like talking through water. During the examination, the temperature in Dr. Hargrave's office dropped noticeably whenever Edmund spoke of his father. The doctor's thermometer recorded a 15-degree decrease during these conversations. Edmund seemed unaware of the cold, showing no signs of discomfort or shivering. Dr. Hargrave's assistant, Nurse Catherine Pembridge, reported seeing her breath mist during the session. The gas lamps in the room flickered intermittently, despite the building's recently installed stabilizing equipment. Most troubling was Edmund's knowledge of events that occurred after his father's death. He correctly identified changes made to the family home, including the relocation of furniture and the addition of new paintings. When asked how he knew these details, Edmund simply replied, "Papa told me." The boy's memory of the photographic sitting was remarkably clear and consistent. He recalled the exact positioning Ashford had requested, the duration of the exposure, and the photographer's obvious distress, but he also remembered details that Ashford had not mentioned to anyone. Edmund described his father adjusting his collar and straightening his waistcoat during the sitting. He claimed Thomas had whispered something to him just before the exposure began. The words, Edmund said, were, "Remember that love conquers even the grave." Dr. Hargrave tested the boy's mental faculties with a series of arithmetic and reading exercises. Edmund performed above average for his age, showing no signs of delusion or fantasy. His grip strength was normal, his reflexes sharp, his vision clear. Yet when the doctor attempted to take Edmund's photograph with a small camera, the results were inexplicable. Every image showed a second shadow beside the boy, roughly the height and build of an adult man. The shadow appeared in multiple exposures, taken from different angles with different lighting conditions. Dr. Hargrave's final report, sealed in the British Medical Association archives, concluded with a single disturbing observation. Edmund Whitmore was not experiencing hallucinations or psychological disturbance. He was, by all medical standards, a perfectly normal child, which made his supernatural encounters all the more terrifying to contemplate. The boy's connection to his deceased father appeared to be genuine, measurable, and completely beyond scientific explanation. "In 40 years of medical practice," Dr. Hargrave wrote, "I have never encountered a case that so thoroughly challenges our understanding of life and death." 3 competing theories emerged from the experts who examined the Whitmore case during the winter of 1888. The first, proposed by Professor Chenley of the London Institute of Optical Sciences, suggested a rare atmospheric phenomenon. He theorized that unusual electromagnetic conditions could have created a temporal echo captured by the camera. Chenley's measurements showed abnormal magnetic readings in the Whitmore parlor on November 15th. His magnetometer detected fluctuations 30% above normal atmospheric levels. The theory gained credibility when similar readings were recorded at other sites of unexplained photography. However, Chenley could not explain how an atmospheric disturbance could produce such specific visual details. The second theory came from Inspector Fitzpatrick himself, who suspected an elaborate criminal conspiracy. He proposed that Margaret Whitmore had hired an actor to impersonate her deceased husband. The motive would be insurance fraud, as Thomas's life policy contained unusual provisions for posthumous claims. Fitzpatrick's investigation revealed that Margaret had indeed consulted a solicitor about the policy terms. But this theory collapsed when the actor would have needed intimate knowledge of family secrets. Moreover, the temperature fluctuations and photographic anomalies remained unexplained. The third theory was advanced by Father Benedict Morse of St. Michael's Church. He believed the phenomenon represented divine intervention, allowing a father to comfort his grieving child. Morse cited biblical precedents of the dead appearing to the living in times of great need. His theological explanation gained support from several prominent church scholars. Yet this theory struggled to account for the physical evidence captured in the photograph. Each theory possessed compelling supporting evidence that made dismissal impossible. Professor Chenley's electromagnetic readings were verified by 3 independent instruments. Inspector Fitzpatrick's criminal investigation uncovered genuine financial motivations for deception. Father Morse's theological research identified 17 similar cases in church records dating back centuries. But each theory also faced insurmountable contradictions that prevented definitive acceptance. The atmospheric phenomenon theory could not explain Edmund's detailed knowledge of his father's appearance. The criminal conspiracy theory failed to account for the photographic plate's chemical anomalies. The divine intervention theory offered no mechanism for the physical temperature changes witnessed. Dr. Hargrave proposed a fourth possibility in his private correspondence with the Royal Society. He suggested that grief itself might possess unknown properties capable of manifesting physical phenomena. This psychological theory drew from emerging research into the connection between emotion and bodily functions. But even Hargrave admitted his hypothesis raised more questions than it answered. The scientific community found itself confronting evidence that defied categorization. Multiple credible witnesses had observed the same impossible events. Physical measurements confirmed anomalies that contradicted established natural laws. Photographic documentation provided irrefutable proof of something that should not exist. By December 1888, the case had attracted attention from researchers across Europe. Letters arrived from Paris, Berlin, and Vienna, requesting copies of the photograph and witness statements. Each correspondent reported similar cases in their own countries, suggesting a widespread phenomenon. The pattern indicated that the Whitmore case was not an isolated incident, but part of something larger. "We stand," wrote Dr. Hargrave in his final report, "at the threshold of discoveries that will reshape our understanding of reality itself." The most harrowing event occurred on the night of December 3, 1888, in the Whitmore family parlor. Margaret had arranged for Father Morse to bless the house and put an end to the supernatural visitations. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 8 o'clock, with Inspector Fitzpatrick present as an official witness. Dr. Hargrave attended to monitor Edmund's physical condition during the proceedings. As Father Morse began his blessing, the temperature in the parlor plummeted to near freezing. The coal fire in the grate flickered and died despite being freshly stoked an hour earlier. Frost began forming on the windows at precisely 8:23 p.m., creating intricate patterns that resembled family portraits. Edmund, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood and walked to his father's former chair. The boy's breath became visible in the frigid air as he began speaking to an unseen presence. His voice carried clearly across the room. "Papa says you must stop trying to send him away." Father Morse continued his prayers, but his hands trembled as he held the holy water. The silver crucifix around his neck grew so cold it burned his skin through his vestments. At 8:47 p.m., a sound began emanating from the walls themselves. It was the rhythmic tapping of the Morse code, spelling out a single word repeatedly: L-O-V-E. Dr. Hargrave's medical bag, placed on the side table, began to vibrate violently. His stethoscope fell to the floor, and when retrieved, it was coated with a thin layer of ice. Inspector Fitzpatrick drew his service revolver, though he could identify no physical threat. The weapon's metal grip became so cold it adhered to his palm, leaving frostbite marks. Margaret Whitmore stood frozen in terror as her son continued his one-sided conversation. Edmund's responses suggested he was receiving detailed instructions from his invisible father. "He says the photograph was just the beginning," the boy announced to the room. "He says there are others like him who want to come back too." The parlor's mahogany furniture began creaking and shifting as if responding to an earthquake. But outside, the December night remained perfectly still. At exactly 9:17 p.m., every glass object in the room shattered simultaneously. The photograph of father and son, protected in its silver frame, remained completely untouched. A smell filled the air that none of the witnesses could identify. It was simultaneously sweet like flowers and acrid like decomposition. The combination was so overwhelming that Father Morse began retching uncontrollably. In the chaos of broken glass and supernatural terror, Edmund walked calmly to the photograph. He picked it up with his small hands and held it against his chest. "Papa has to go now," he said quietly, "but he'll be back when I need him." The temperature immediately began returning to normal as the boy spoke these words. The supernatural phenomena ceased as abruptly as they had begun, but the damage to the witness's understanding of reality was permanent and irreversible. In the morning, Father Morse would submit his resignation to the church hierarchy. Inspector Fitzpatrick would request transfer to a different district. Dr. Hargrave would begin researching cases of supernatural medicine, and Margaret Whitmore would pack her belongings and leave Blackheath forever. "Some doors," she told her sister the next day, "should never be opened." The immediate aftermath of the December 3rd incident created ripple effects that lasted for decades. Margaret Whitmore and Edmund left their Blackheath home on December 8, 1888, never to return. The house remained empty for 6 months before the Whitmore estate finally found a tenant. The new occupants, the Henderson family, reported no supernatural activity during their 3-year residence. However, they did note that the parlor remained perpetually cold, regardless of heating efforts. Edmund's school records from his new home in Brighton show a marked change in his behavior. His teachers described him as withdrawn and prone to staring at empty spaces for extended periods. Father Morse's resignation was accepted by the Bishop of London on December 15, 1888. He retreated to a monastery in Scotland, where he spent his remaining years in contemplative silence. Inspector Fitzpatrick transferred to the Whitechapel Division, where he investigated the Jack the Ripper murders. Colleagues noted that he seemed unusually comfortable with inexplicable and disturbing crime scenes. Dr. Hargrave began collecting reports of similar supernatural medical cases from across Britain. His private research files, discovered after his death in 1923, contained over 200 documented incidents. Each case involved recent communication between the living and the dead, often centered around children. The photographic plate itself was stored in the evidence room at Scotland Yard for exactly 1 year. On November 15, 1889, the anniversary of the original sitting, something extraordinary occurred. The night watchman reported seeing figures moving within the photograph itself. When examined the next morning, the image had changed subtly but unmistakably. Thomas Whitmore's hand, previously resting on Edmund's shoulder, now pointed toward the camera. His facial expression had shifted from paternal protection to urgent warning. Professor Chenley's electromagnetic monitoring equipment continued recording anomalies at the Whitmore house. The readings persisted until 1891, when the equipment was mysteriously destroyed in a laboratory fire. No cause for the blaze was ever determined, though witnesses reported seeing the flames burn cold and blue. The insurance investigation concluded that the fire had burned at temperatures below those needed for normal combustion. By 1895, 17 other families across Britain had reported identical photographic phenomena. All cases involved recently deceased fathers appearing in portraits with their surviving children. The pattern suggested a widespread supernatural occurrence rather than isolated incidents. Each family reported the same sequence: initial contact, photographic evidence, escalating phenomena, then sudden departure. Dr. Evelyn Ashcroft compiled these cases into a confidential report for the British Medical Association. Her findings indicated that the phenomenon occurred predominantly in families where the father had died suddenly or violently. The children involved were typically between the ages of 6 and 12, suggesting a developmental factor. The photographic evidence was consistent across all cases, showing the same chemical and temperature anomalies. In 1902, the Whitmore photograph was transferred to a sealed vault beneath the British Museum. The curator's notes indicate that the image continued to change periodically over the following decades. By 1920, Thomas Whitmore's expression had become increasingly urgent and warning. Museum staff reported that the temperature around the vault dropped significantly during each transformation. The case file was officially closed in 1925, marked Unexplained Natural Phenomenon. But the questions raised by the Whitmore investigation would haunt researchers for generations. The boundary between life and death, it seemed, was far more permeable than Victorian science had believed. "The dead," wrote Dr. Hargrave in his final journal entry, "do not always accept their fate quietly." The rediscovery of the Whitmore case occurred in 1963, when renovations at Scotland Yard uncovered forgotten archive boxes. Detective Inspector James Crawford found the sealed file while investigating cold cases for a new database system. The photographic evidence had been stored in a climate-controlled environment for 74 years. When Crawford first examined the image, he noticed something that previous investigators had missed. In the background shadow that earlier witnesses had identified as Margaret Whitmore stood another figure. This third person was barely visible, requiring magnification to detect their presence clearly. The figure appeared to be that of an elderly man, dressed in clothing from an even earlier period. Crawford's investigation revealed that the Whitmore property had been built on the site of an 18th-century cemetery. Parish records showed that over 300 bodies had been relocated when the housing development began. But the relocation had been incomplete, with an estimated 40 graves remaining undisturbed beneath the foundations. The elderly figure in the photograph matched descriptions from a portrait of William Ashworth, buried on the site in 1784. Ashworth had been a widower who died shortly after losing his only son to consumption. The parallels between Ashworth's story and Thomas Whitmore's situation were disturbing and unmistakable. Crawford's research uncovered a pattern of supernatural activity at the location dating back over a century. Previous tenants had reported unexplained phenomena, though none had possessed photographic evidence. The 1920s occupants had abandoned the house after claiming to see family gatherings of deceased relatives. During World War II, the building served as a temporary morgue for air raid casualties. Military personnel reported that bodies stored in the former parlor showed signs of movement during the night. Official records dismissed these accounts as stress-induced hallucinations among overworked medical staff. Crawford's investigation revealed that Edmund Whitmore had died in 1954 at the age of 74. His obituary mentioned no surviving family members, suggesting the supernatural encounters had prevented normal relationships. Edmund's personal effects, donated to charity after his death, included a collection of photographs. Each image showed Edmund at different ages, standing beside the same mysterious adult figure. The figure's appearance remained consistent across decades, never showing signs of aging or decay. Crawford attempted to trace other families from Dr. Hargrave's research files. Of the 17 documented cases from the 1890s, 14 families had experienced multiple generations of supernatural contact. Children who had communicated with deceased fathers grew up to become conduits for other spirits. The phenomenon appeared to be hereditary, passing from parent to child like a genetic trait. Modern psychological evaluation of the historical witnesses revealed no signs of mass hysteria or shared delusion. Each account remained internally consistent and corroborated by physical evidence. The temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic anomalies, and photographic changes defied conventional explanation. Crawford's final report recommended that the case remain sealed indefinitely. The implications for public understanding of death and consciousness were deemed too disturbing for general knowledge. The photograph was transferred to a more secure facility, where it continues to be monitored by specialized equipment. Recent digital analysis has revealed additional figures appearing in the background shadows over time. Each new presence seems to be connected to the location's tragic history of separated families. The Whitmore case established a template for investigating supernatural phenomena using scientific methodology, but it also demonstrated that some mysteries transcend the boundaries of rational inquiry. Death, Crawford concluded in his report, may not be the absolute ending we have assumed it to be. Modern analysis of the Whitmore photograph began in 1987 when digital scanning technology first became available to researchers. Dr. Sarah Pemberton, a descendant of the original chemist Oliver Pemberton, led the computerized investigation. High-resolution scanning revealed details that had been invisible to Victorian-era examination techniques. The digital enhancement showed microscopic variations in the photographic emulsion around Thomas Whitmore's figure. These variations formed patterns consistent with extreme temperature exposure, despite the controlled indoor environment. More disturbing was the discovery of temporal layering within the image itself. Different sections of the photograph appeared to have been exposed at slightly different moments in time. Edmund's image showed motion blur consistent with a 47-second exposure, matching Ashford's records. But Thomas Whitmore's figure displayed the sharp clarity of an instantaneous capture. The contradiction suggested that father and son existed in different temporal states during the sitting. Computer analysis of the shadow patterns revealed impossible geometric relationships. Light sources that illuminated Edmund cast no corresponding shadows for his father. Conversely, Thomas's shadow appeared without any identifiable light source to create it. The photographic chemistry itself showed signs of manipulation, but not by human hands. Silver halide crystals in specific areas had been rearranged into complex geometric patterns. These formations resembled crystalline structures found in deep-sea environments under extreme pressure. No known chemical process could have created such patterns in a Victorian-era photographic studio. Dr. Pemberton's team also discovered evidence of electromagnetic field disturbance embedded in the image. The photographic emulsion contained microscopic iron particles aligned in ways that indicated powerful magnetic forces. These alignments created a hidden map of electromagnetic activity during the original exposure. The pattern suggested the presence of an energy field roughly the size and shape of an adult human. Spectral analysis revealed traces of elements that should not have been present in 1888 photography. Isotopes of silver and bromine that would not be discovered until the 20th century appeared throughout the image. Their presence indicated that the photograph had been influenced by forces beyond Victorian scientific understanding. Most troubling was the discovery that the image continued to evolve even in digital storage. Comparison scans taken 6 months apart showed subtle but measurable changes in Thomas Whitmore's expression. His eyes, originally focused on the camera, gradually shifted to look directly at Edmund. The progression was imperceptible to casual observation but undeniable when measured precisely. Dr. Pemberton's research team also examined the background figures that earlier investigators had noted. Digital enhancement revealed at least 7 additional presences scattered throughout the shadows. Each figure could be identified through historical records as individuals buried beneath the Whitmore property. All had died while separated from their children, creating a gathering of supernatural parental longing. The modern investigation confirmed what Victorian researchers had suspected but could not prove. The Whitmore photograph was not simply documentation of a supernatural event. It had become a portal, allowing continued interaction between the living and the dead. The image itself possessed properties that transcended normal photographic chemistry. Each examination revealed new layers of impossible detail embedded within the seemingly simple portrait. "We are not looking at a photograph," Dr. Pemberton concluded in her 1991 report. "We are looking at a window between worlds that happens to be made of silver and light." The global pattern of similar incidents emerged when Dr. Pemberton's research was shared with international colleagues. Archives in France revealed the case of the Dubois family photograph from Lyon, taken in September 1888. German records documented the Müller incident in Bavaria, occurring just weeks after the Whitmore sitting. Italian researchers reported the Benedetti case from Rome, where a deceased father appeared in a family portrait. Each case shared identical characteristics: recent paternal death, young children, and impossible photographic evidence. The timing suggested a worldwide phenomenon rather than isolated local occurrences. Professor Heinrich Zimmermann of the University of Vienna had been collecting such cases since 1889. His private archives contained documentation of 43 similar incidents across Europe. All occurred between October 1888 and March 1889, within a 6-month window of supernatural activity. Zimmermann's theory proposed that some astronomical alignment had temporarily weakened the barrier between life and death. His calculations showed unusual planetary configurations during the period in question. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn had formed a rare triangular alignment not seen for over 2 centuries. Ancient astronomical texts suggested that such alignments could influence spiritual phenomena. But Zimmermann's theory could not explain why the effect was limited to bereaved fathers and their children. Dr. Pemberton's comparative analysis revealed subtle differences between the various international cases. The European photographs showed less dramatic temperature effects than the British incidents. American cases, documented by the Smithsonian Institution, displayed stronger electromagnetic anomalies. These variations suggested that local conditions influenced the manifestation of supernatural phenomena. Geological surveys of the affected locations revealed an unexpected common factor. Each site was located above significant underground water sources or mineral deposits. The Whitmore property sat above an underground stream that fed into the River Thames. Similar hydrological features existed beneath all documented supernatural photography sites. Modern paranormal researchers theorized that flowing water might serve as a conductor for spiritual energy. This hypothesis gained support from historical folklore associating water with communication between worlds. But scientific testing of the water sources revealed no unusual chemical or electromagnetic properties. The connection remained correlational rather than causal, adding another layer to the mystery. Dr. Pemberton's team also investigated the fate of families involved in supernatural photography incidents. Statistical analysis showed significantly higher rates of depression, early death, and social isolation. Children who had communicated with deceased parents rarely formed normal adult relationships. Many became obsessed with death and spiritualism, dedicating their lives to seeking further contact. The psychological impact of bridging the gap between life and death appeared to be universally traumatic. Even positive supernatural encounters left lasting damage on the human psyche. Edmund Whitmore's later life exemplified this pattern of supernatural scarring. Medical records showed repeated hospitalizations for nervous exhaustion and melancholia. He never married, never formed close friendships, and died alone in a London boarding house. His final words, according to the attending physician, were, "Papa is waiting for me." The global investigation revealed that supernatural photography was not a random occurrence. It represented a systematic breach in the natural order, affecting specific families under precise conditions. The phenomenon followed patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose behind the manifestations. "These were not random ghostly appearances," Dr. Pemberton wrote in her comprehensive report. "They were targeted interventions by forces that understood both love and loss better than we do." The most recent development in the Whitmore case occurred in 2019, when the British Museum agreed to digitize their sealed archives. Dr. Marcus Chen, a specialist in historical document preservation, was assigned to scan the photograph. His initial scan revealed that the image had continued evolving during its decades in storage. Thomas Whitmore's figure now appeared to be reaching toward the camera lens itself. His expression had transformed from paternal protection to desperate urgency over the course of 131 years. The most shocking discovery was that new figures had appeared in the background shadows. Digital analysis identified these as Edmund Whitmore and Margaret Whitmore, both deceased for decades. The family had been reunited within the confines of the photograph itself. Dr. Chen's equipment registered electromagnetic fluctuations whenever the image was displayed on computer screens. Laboratory personnel reported feeling observed while working with the digital files. Security cameras in the scanning room malfunctioned repeatedly, showing ghostly figures moving through the footage. The temperature in the laboratory dropped by 15 degrees during each scanning session. These phenomena convinced Dr. Chen that the photograph retained active supernatural properties. His report recommended that the image be studied exclusively through remote monitoring systems. Direct human contact with the photograph appeared to trigger increasingly intense manifestations. The British Museum responded by placing the original image in a specially designed containment system. The photograph is now stored in a climate-controlled vault, monitored by automated sensors. Human access requires approval from a committee of historians, scientists, and religious officials. Only 3 individuals have been permitted to view the original image since 2020. Each reported experiencing profound psychological disturbance for weeks following their examination. The digital scans are stored on isolated computer systems with no network connections. Copies of the image cannot be transmitted electronically without causing system malfunctions. Physical printouts fade within hours, as if the image refuses to be replicated. Dr. Chen's final analysis suggested that the Whitmore photograph has become something beyond documentation. It serves as a repository for consciousness that transcends death itself. The image contains the preserved essence of individuals who refuse to accept their mortality. Modern quantum physics offers theoretical frameworks for understanding such phenomena. Concepts of consciousness as a fundamental property of the universe provide possible explanations. But the Whitmore case predates these theories by over a century. Victorian investigators encountered evidence of quantum consciousness without the vocabulary to describe it. Their documentation provides a historical record of phenomena that science is only beginning to understand. The implications extend far beyond a single family's supernatural encounter. The case suggests that death may not represent the absolute termination of consciousness. Under specific conditions, the boundary between life and death becomes permeable. Love, grief, and parental bonds possess transformative power that transcends physical laws. The Whitmore photograph stands as proof that reality operates according to principles we have yet to discover. Current research into consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the nature of time may eventually provide answers. But for now, the case remains a window into mysteries that challenge our fundamental assumptions about existence. The photograph asks questions, Dr. Chen concluded in his 2021 report, that we are not yet prepared to answer. Today, the Whitmore photograph rests in Vault 7 of the British Museum's restricted archives. The climate-controlled chamber maintains a constant temperature of 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 45% humidity. Automated sensors monitor the image for changes, recording data every 12 hours. The photograph continues to evolve, with new details appearing approximately every 6 months. Most recently, observers have noted the appearance of what appears to be writing in the background shadows. The text, when enhanced digitally, spells out a single word in Edmund's childish handwriting: forever. Dr. Chen's research team maintains a 24-hour watch on the digital monitoring systems. Any significant change in the image triggers immediate alerts to an international network of researchers. The photograph has become a focal point for the scientific study of consciousness after death. Universities in 12 countries have established research programs based on the Whitmore case. Each investigation raises new questions about the nature of reality and the persistence of human bonds. The case has also influenced modern understanding of grief and its potential physical manifestations. Therapists treating bereaved children now recognize symptoms similar to those exhibited by Edmund Whitmore. The phenomenon, known as Whitmore syndrome, affects approximately 2% of children who lose parents suddenly. These children report ongoing communication with deceased family members and show electromagnetic anomalies. Modern medical equipment can now detect the same temperature and magnetic field fluctuations documented in 1888. The original photograph serves as a baseline for understanding contemporary supernatural manifestations. But it also raises disturbing questions about the nature of death itself. If consciousness can persist beyond physical death, what other assumptions about existence might be wrong? The Whitmore case suggests that love possesses properties that transcend the boundaries of life and death. Parental bonds may be so fundamental to human nature that they survive bodily destruction. The photograph offers evidence that reality operates according to principles beyond current scientific understanding. Each generation of researchers discovers new layers of complexity within the seemingly simple image. The case continues to challenge experts across multiple disciplines, from physics to psychology to theology. No single theory adequately explains all aspects of the supernatural phenomena documented over 135 years. The photograph remains active, continuing to change and respond to human observation. Its persistence suggests that some mysteries are meant to evolve alongside human understanding. The Whitmore family's story transcends historical documentation to become a living investigation. Their supernatural encounter offers a glimpse into the deepest questions about human existence. What survives when we die? How do bonds of love operate beyond physical presence? Can consciousness transcend the limitations of matter and time? The photograph of Thomas and Edmund Whitmore poses these questions without providing easy answers. It stands as evidence that reality contains depths we have yet to explore. The image challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about the finality of death and the nature of love. If cases like this fascinate you, subscribe and turn on notifications for the next file. Disclaimer: this script is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, institutions, and incidents are invented or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental, created solely for entertainment.